We talk about terrorism because it's flashy and it kills a lot of people. Honestly, if I had to choose between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas with a nuclear weapon, or I had to choose, between that or Iran, China, Russia, and all of them having social media dominance, I would choose the terrorists with nuclear weapons every single day. Because if you can poison our minds, all of us, if you can cause what some people call discourse collapse, make it impossible for Western society to digest information, to talk with each other without fighting, to understand things, like that's how you kill the United States. That's how you kill the West.
Welcome to the Uncharted Ministries podcast, and super excited today to have Ryan Mauro with us. And Ryan is a prominent international security analyst, and he's president of Doubting Thomas Research. It's a foundation, nonprofit that is spearheading new research into the historical evidence for the Exodus and the biblical narrative on that event. He's currently an adjunct instructor for Liberty University, Regent University, where he teaches Homeland Security, Counter-Terrorism. And Mauro has approximately 20 years of professional experience in the realms of international security. And so, boy, we could not think of anyone better to talk to, Ryan, than you. And we were privileged to meet you in Saudi Arabia on that trip. That was an incredible trip with Joel Richardson. But man, can you believe in the last 2 years how the whole map in the Middle East has changed? Assad is gone. New government in Lebanon. Hamas on the run. Jordan nervous about an uprising happening. Hamas in the Gaza Strip showed their true colors. And that's what we want to start off with right now, because Trump made a big announcement concerning the U.S. taking over Gaza and rebuilding it. And Ryan, Joanna and I were watching the TV and we heard him say, we're going to take it, own it, and make it safe. And I said, Joanna, did he just say we're going to take the Gaza Strip? And she said, I think that's what he said. I said, okay, now that's something I've never heard before. I've never heard that option. And I think people were like, okay, this is out of the box thinking, but the Arabs are saying, okay, what else do you have in that box? We're not sure. We're ready for that. What do you think of this?
I mean, my initial reaction was, well, first I changed my name on Twitter from Ryan Mauro to Ryan Mauro, future governor of Gaza, just as a joke, because it was nuts. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I heard it, I thought this is nuts. I still think it's a crazy objective. But I think there's some context behind it that explains that it wasn't just the outburst of a madman as people are making it sound. But before I get into what that context is, people also have to understand in the Middle East, and I don't think this is part of Trump's calculations. This is just what I'm about to explain. It's just how it is. Yeah. There's so much hyperbole, right? So much hypocrisy, shifting of positions, that the reason you're not seeing millions of people in the streets like you would expect, because we always hear about this. You got to fear the Arab street, just, millions of people in an anti-American uproar rising up, and it never happens. But you would think it would have happened this time. But the reason it doesn't happen is because the media, the public figures, this is how they talk. It's all over the top. They might say something and then just not do it. They might say something and do the opposite. They might switch sides. Like, that goes on all the time. And that's so foreign to us as Americans that we hear it and we take it literally. And we say, he said he's going to do it. I guess this is going to happen. And Middle Easterners, they'll react as if it's a serious proposal, but they're also kind of thinking, all right, well, I mean, let's see.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, but what the context is he said this right after meeting with Netanyahu, and right after lots of reports about dialogue between the U.S. and the Saudis and the Israelis, all basically trying to come up with how long do we have to wait before we sign the peace treaty between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Which, if you talk to anyone on the inside, I mean, we know that it's like that's just a done deal. It's just about the timing and some of the details. Even MBS, the Crown Prince, basically said it. He gave an interview. He was like, I probably have to wait like a year after it settles down. Yeah. So those were the conversations that were happening. And a big part of that conversation the majority of the conversation is going to be about NEOM and Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. This is the plan of the Crown Prince and the Saudi government to get off of reliance on oil exclusively, to bring in tourism, to make like almost like an international capital, just the trade zone of the world, robotic technology, opening up to the world in northwestern Saudi Arabia, where you and I went to go see what we think is the real Mount Sinai. So that's quite the coincidence that's right there too.
Interesting.
Perfect for their objective of having tourists from around the world coming. And so that's the conversation. And then Israel also presented the Gaza 2035 plan, which is to basically turn Gaza into Dubai. So in northwestern Saudi Arabia, which is near Gaza, Saudi Arabia wants to turn that into Dubai, a city 22 times the size of New York City. Israel wants to turn Gaza into like a new Dubai and a free trade zone. So these plans like line up perfectly.
That's right.
So that's the conversation those two leaders were having with Trump before he made the comment. That's the key to understanding where all this came from. What happened? And I didn't predict it, although I should have, knowing Trump's personality. They're talking about all the money that's going to be made. All the international businesses that are already bidding on contracts are going to come in, beachfront property. Trump, we know he likes to talk about his own business success.
Yeah,
he's a real estate guy. He's going to think about America. He's also going to think about himself. And he's going to say, well, wait. You guys are talking about making all this money, but I'm the president of the United States. What about us? I mean, that's his personality. And so then he comes out and it appears random to everyone else that doesn't know that background. And he says, yeah, those plans, we're going to own it. We're going to run it. So that's what he was, I believe, reacting to, because that was obviously the conversation that happened. That explains why he would do that. And you look at it, there's a clear pattern when he goes into these things where if someone stakes a claim to something, what's his reaction? I'm bigger than you. I'm better than you. I already have it. What are you going to give me? So that's the context to understand about a lot of what's going on here, even with Jordan and Egypt. And that's how you make sense of it.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting being in Gaza in ministry probably 15 times. Ryan, every time we would end a mission trip there, as we're working in refugee camps, Darabella and all of those, we would go to one of the restaurants on the beach. And if you just shut out what's around you, you would think you're in Tel Aviv. I mean, the good food, great, courteous waiters, and people just, you know how the Arabs do with hospitality. It's fantastic. And so nobody ever sees that. But it's an open air prison, Tom. Yeah, right. And then when you realize that at one point there were 700 millionaires in Gaza, and we've gone by houses where we would shoot pictures, I could send them to you, and when you frame them with all the other stuff out, like the graffiti that says "We will never bow down" or whatever, you would think it's a house in Santa Barbara, California. You would not believe it's Gaza. It's certainly not right next to a refugee camp. And then I think, okay, was Trump just trying to put something out there to get the Arabs to engage? Because we do know from an insider in Israel that, as they were talking about the day after, they went back to Egypt and said, would you take Gaza? You're the logical ones. It's right up against your fence. They didn't want it after the war when they gave it back to Israel anyway. Why would they be motivated to do that? Israel offered them $100 billion to take Gaza, and they turned it down.
Wow.
So now, and they have money, they are cash poor right now because tourism's way off because of the war. And so you think about that, you think, well, what are they going to do? You know? And of course, if Israel keeps in there, everything's going to be their fault. So when I heard that, I thought, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I like fresh thinking for sure. I mean, it's kind of one that makes you scratch your head and go, I wonder if that would work. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it's crazy. But anyway, time will tell. And then, of course, this Saturday, what do you think about the pronouncement about this Saturday? All the all the hostages need to be out. What do you think about that?
I've been saying for a long time, and I have friends in the Trump administration who I will happily push on this, that when Hamas holds Americans hostage, this is no longer an Israeli Hamas conflict. Like, it bothers me so much that yeah, Israel can bomb the targets for us. I don't know. I want us to do. No, you attack Americans, Americans attack you.
Yeah.
There's a huge psychological effect because the Palestinians in the Arab world, they just have it stuck in their mind that despite all the odds and history, somehow they're going to win. Allah's going to come in and rescue them for those that are really devout. You throw in, all right, well, now the U.S. is involved. That's going to make some people, whether they say it or not, have some second thoughts.
Sure.
The fact that Hamas can kidnap and torture Americans and just keep holding them, and the conversation's all about, all right, well, ceasefire and Israel striking targets, and how do we like, I would have American bombers in the sky the next day, and tell Israel, give us some of those targets. Like, we need to put on a show. I suspect that's about to happen. But it's interesting over the past week. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to come off like I'm fully endorsing what Trump has said. I'm just explaining the context because he's also shifted already a little bit. I mean, at first it was all the Palestinians should leave Gaza. Well, first it sounded like he was just saying a lot. Then it was like all of them.
All of them.
And then he was like, oh, but once reconstructed, there'll be Palestinians and lots of other people, which was a clue that I knew he was thinking about Gaza 2035 and Saudi Vision, because other people, he's thinking of the investors. And then yesterday or the day before, he changed it to, he was like, oh, no, they're not going to be able to come back. I don't see the value in that. I'm not one of these people that thinks that when he speaks, it's all calculated and he studied from books and said, this is how I'm going to say, and scripted. I think he has a tendency to be theatrical and he gets carried away, and it sometimes is counterproductive. And I think that would be an example of it. But you did see that Jordan, said that, all right, at first they said no, but then they said, all right, we'll take in 2,000 sick Palestinian children. You'll know what's actually going on there, but most people won't. It's going to be a lot more than that because children do not leave without their families.
That's right.
And Palestinians in Gaza, on the low end, the estimates I've seen is that the family has 3 to 5 children. And usually, as you know, the cousins are a lot closer than immediate, cousins are here in the United States.
That's right.
They'll also leave. So when Jordan says 2006 children, it's a little slight. No, it's going to be a lot more.
Yeah.
That's just the way of, getting people to voluntarily move out. And then today we had Egypt come out with their proposal. And it's funny that they call it their proposal because there's a few details that are different, but it fits right in with Israel's Gaza 2035. It fits right in with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. And so what you're having happen is the different Abraham Accords countries are going to be part of administering Gaza when all of this is over, at least as everyone hopes, with a nominal Palestinian administration. They're all putting their plans forth that they know are going to be accepted so that Morocco, all the countries are going to do this. They can stake claim and say, hey, we're an equal partner in this because everyone wants to be part of shaping the new rich Gaza. So some of what you're seeing is that Egypt says no, and they say, oh, well, accept our plan. They know it'll be accepted. And then when it gets implemented, it's no longer, oh, we're submitting to the U.S. plan or the Saudi plan or the Israeli plan. No, it's our plan. Really, it's all of our plans. And we all, they all agreed. But this is diplomacy in the region.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about the first time I went to Gaza, I saw people with necklaces on with the key. And I lots of people. And I said to my friends, some of them were former Muslims, what's the deal with the key? Well, this is key to their front door of their house that they used to have in Hebron or wherever. And they hope they're going to get it back. And I mean, you would see hundreds of people with the key on. And I mean, look since 48, Israel's developed. I mean, probably where their house was is a parking lot now for a shopping center or something, who knows? And so just pushing them out of Gaza and then they can't come back, I think everybody'd be wearing a key again, and saying we want to go back. And they'd have the success story of how nice it is. And sadly, there's human lives there. We work with Muslim background believers that love the Lord, and they're intense right now, Ryan. And they were saying this, it was so sad. They said, we have 2 enemies. We said, who are they? And they said, Hamas outside. And then I thought they were going to say Israel, but not Israel. They have nothing against Israel. They said, and then the armed gangs that are outside the tents, trying to kidnap children, trying to rape women, trying to steal our young boys to take them into Hamas. And so they're just caught up in this horrible situation. And I know it's easy to just paint a broad brushstroke and say they're all terrorists. They didn't do anything to stop Hamas. But then I say, hey, look at the last 4 years we had. We were trying to stop things and we couldn't in the last administration. So there are human beings there in Gaza. We've met them, some good-hearted Muslims there that hate Hamas. There's a church there above ground, and then there's this secret church there that's growing. And so we want something different for them. And to just go back and start it all over again, and then Hamas starts firing because they're totally irrelevant. They had a 3% approval rating before the war. So the only thing they can do is attack Israel and then say, we're the big defender of the Palestinians. And finally, they just get in line behind them. So it's an endless cycle. But in a broader picture, what do you think about Trump's plan, what he's saying about the Middle East, the potential actions that he's doing now? How do you think it's going to change things?
Well, first, to further prove your point about, having sympathy for people in Gaza, there are protests against Hamas that, start that, and that includes former supporters of Hamas who woke up after, the attacks happened. They're like, well, I guess Allah's not on our side because, he's not blessing what we're doing because we're losing. Yeah. But Israel, everyone agrees, friend and foe, Israel's been amazingly successful in fighting Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, like stunning. I can't believe the level of success. That only happens if you have a lot of people in Gaza working as spies. That's not all technology. So you've got to have tens of thousands of Gazans who said, I'm going to work with the Israelis against these guys. So, there are good people there. And when you say things like you can say in a loving way, all right, well, let's voluntarily try to, move you to a better place that we can reconstruct, because it's hard when a war is going on to rebuild the homes and stuff. There's a way to do that. But then when you say you can't come back, what really makes it difficult is that countries like Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, they need workers in NEO.
Yeah.
Like they could hire a lot of those Palestinians. They need them. Like this could have gone in a productive way. But then when you say, well, they can't come back. So now you're talking about ethnic cleansing. The left is right when that's what that is. Now you're saying if Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, whoever takes in Palestine, they're now complicit in that. Mm-hmm. It's no longer an act of love on their part or an act of economics. It's now complicit in an act to eliminate the Palestinian population from Gaza permanently. So you just, so it gets very frustrating for me where there's these like wonderful moments with the Trump administration. The same thing with the Biden administration. I'm really not I try not to be a political guy. Like there's moments where I'm like, man, just rock on, just amazing. And then there's moments where I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so I've had like a lot of those over the past couple of weeks. And so broadly, when it comes to the Middle East, I have the same, feelings with Trump when it comes to China, Russia, North Korea. It's erratic, and there's some good parts to being erratic. The madman theory. You don't want to mess with the guy at the bar that's just like screaming and throwing things. And so being unpredictable and overreacting, there's benefits. But sometimes I fail to see a necessary amount of consistent logic and principle. And so the Middle East is like one, I have very mixed feelings, I would say, about the U.S. policy towards the region, like I've always had, and then under the Trump administration as well, where there's moments that are incredible and there's moments that just boggle my mind.
Man, and I'll tell you, the first time I went to Gaza, we woke up one morning and 4 men were hanging from a tree, big, huge tree.
You saw this?
Mm-hmm. And I asked the pastor, what in the world happened? And he said the people said they are collaborators with Israel. The C word in Gaza. Ooh, collaborators, the worst. Well, come to find out, we found out 2 days later, they weren't collaborators with Israel. They didn't know anyone in Israel. A guy didn't like them, a bad business deal. He said they're collaborators and 4 guys are dead. And so that's just like normal there. Those things happen. And so the tribalism is so strong there. And then I think it's normal. We went to a funeral and there were people from Voice of the Martyrs there. There were people from Hamas there. It was a pastor. But if you're a neighbor and you know this guy, you come to the funeral. Doesn't matter politically, anything, you just do. That's the Arab way. So I'm sitting next to this guy, Ryan, and I said, what do you do in Gaza? He said, I'm a Mukhtar. I said, oh, I'm not familiar. What's a Mukhtar? He goes, well, I get involved in family disputes. Like this guy lives next to another guy and they get in a fight. So this guy comes over and kills his son, cuts his head off. And so he comes over and throws a bomb in their house. And then it just keeps going back and forth. And we get involved in things that the government, it's small. The government doesn't have time to get involved in. And so we figured these things out. And I just thought, and this is normal? But it really is, it really is. And so with the collaborating, like you're saying, we knew there had to be collaborators there because as we first got involved in Gaza, I remember watching a CNN report and it showed an Israeli helicopter hit a terrorist and there was massive gridlock, but it just hit this one car, didn't hurt any other car, just took it out like that. So I'm asking this pastor, how in the world that happened? He said, it's simple. Israel will find a Palestinian that will turn. They give him a spray bottle. It looks like water. And they say, spray, you seen this guy? Yeah, spray this on top of his car. And they can pick it up with infrared. They give him $300. And then if they hit the guy, another $300. And so sure enough, they would do it or they'd put it on a house. So all kinds of things. Obviously, Israel's not going to report on this, but there had to be people talking. I mean, look at how they got Sinwar, there had to be people talking. So anyway, but the whole jihadist theology, do you see that growing as a result of the war? Or do you think people are getting sick of it?
I think it grew until Israel started retaliating. And that's because just like with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, there's this perception in the Muslim world, but especially the Arab world, where they have these debates about theology and like whose interpretation is correct.
Yeah.
But the way that's a lot to dive into. Like people don't always have the time to do that. So one of the ways you figure out who's right and who's wrong is who's winning in the battlefield. So, someone that didn't agree with Al-Qaeda and ISIS before, well, it looked like they were being successful. Mm-hmm. All right, Allah's blessing them. That's Allah signaling they have the right interpretation. They're behaving in the way that they're supposed to be. And then the reverse of that, and again, there's been even terrorists will point this out to each other when they're fighting with each other. You start losing, it's Allah's judgment. I mean, the ultimate sign of Allah's judgment is that the infidel starts really beating you down.
Yeah.
And suddenly and clearly and consistently. And so when that started happening to ISIS, that's why, ISIS started pretty rapidly going because, they rose real rapidly because it looked like Allah was blessing them. These new guys showed up, a little bit of a new philosophy. Maybe they figured it out. But then they started just getting destroyed, and then they kind of rapidly recede. Hamas, October 7, 2023, probably a perception that, now's that time for that Islamic end times prophecy from the Hadith that you've been hearing about, where come find the Jew that's hiding behind the rock and come and kill him. They, God's obviously blessing Hamas and those that are backing them. All right, well, that looked good for about a day, but something happened because now look at what happened. Hamas just got absolutely hammered. The leadership killed. The success in Iran where they killed Ismail Haniyeh. Look what happened to Hezbollah. Look what happened to Assad.
Pagers.
Look what happened to the Iranian network.
Yeah.
Look what happened to the Houthis. Like you couldn't have a clearer sign that God is not in favor of these guys. So I would say it was receding before. There was a spike, and now it's receding. But what you're seeing increasing, and I haven't seen any analysts really point this out, is that if you look at the youth, they'll use Islamic vernacular, but a lot of them, you can tell, aren't really into it. So there's Islamic vernacular, like jihadist terms that you use because they're part of their culture, and then there's ones that you use because you actually believe it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those who use it aren't really practicing, but they use Islamic vernacular, and who they actually support are the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. A communist group. So especially in the United States, most of these groups that are doing the protests, we think they're jihadists, and there's Hamas supporters, but not all Hamas supporters have Hamas as their favorite group. They're actually communists that support the PFLP, the communist Palestinian group backed by Iran. And we assume they're jihadists. Oh, you support Hamas, supposed to be a jihadist. It's actually, no, they're actually supporters of the communist allies of Hamas. And so that you're seeing some shift there. And so in my recent writings and studies, what I've decided to do, because I was struggling to try to really define how this is happening, because it is different than 2001 with 9/11 now, is I just say that there's a seditionist movement internationally within the United States, seditionist movement, because you have white nationalists teaming up with them. You have black and white supremacists working together now. Jihadists, the communists, the anarchists. What do they have in common? I mean, they all hate the West. They obviously want to destroy Israel. And it's sedition, even if they don't like each other. So I call it a seditionist movement. Globally, I call it the axis of sedition because that's not just their ideology, it's also their strategy. Russia, China, Iran, what is all this? The supporting of terrorists and militias, disinformation on the internet, that's all acts of sedition to destroy the West from within as opposed through invasions. And they favor that even more than terrorism now. We talk about terrorism because it's flashy and it kills a lot of people. Honestly, if I had to choose between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas with a nuclear weapon, or I had to choose, between that or Iran, China, Russia, and all of them having social media dominance, I would choose the terrorists with nuclear weapons every single day. Because if you can poison our minds, all of us, if you can cause what some people call discourse collapse, make it impossible for Western society to digest information, to talk with each other without fighting, to understand things, that's how you kill the United States.
For sure.
That's how you kill the West.
Yeah.
We can recover from even a nuclear terrorist attack.
Yeah.
You destroy our civil society and our ability to even dialogue with each other and understand things because you're putting so much BS everywhere that people either just give up and don't pay attention or they adopt wrong narratives.
Yeah.
That's how you destroy us.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you know what? About 70% of the Middle East is 30 and under, wherever you go. And so we started a ministry, I Found the Truth, ifoundthetruth.com. These are former Muslims sharing their testimonies of how they came to faith in Christ. A lot of them had a dream. A lot of them had a neighbor that shared a Bible verse, or they saw a believer that seemed to have peace in the midst of war if they're in Syria. And so we started. It was really slow as it took off, Ryan, but it's just cruising now. 2.6 million followers. Incredible videos, powerfully done, well done. Amanda, our producer today, does them with her son Josh, and they're fantastic. But we target certain areas, the rough areas, the places where Muslims are, we hope, getting sick of jihadist theology and are open to something else. And it's amazing the conversations that are going on online. So there really is hope. And there is, people don't believe it, but there is a great awakening among Muslims that are just finally, Arabic, halas, it's over. I'm tired of this. This is not what I want to do. But during this war, there's a couple of things that really surprised me and Joanne. And one of them is on October 7th, 2023, it seemed like Israel got about an afternoon of sympathy. And then after that, it was over. And I remember the next week at UCLA, they're marching, Jew, you can't hide. We'll get you with genocide. And nobody gets called into the office on that. Nobody, gets thrown out of the school. And it was like whack-a-mole. It just started coming up and nobody was caring anymore. They were just saying it. They were just doing it. Now, most of them are cowards with masks on and that, but still they were out marching. They were doing all those things. That was a shock how fast that grew. It just went across the globe. And then secondly, how fast Syria fell apart basically in a weekend, and he's gone. He's on his way to Russia, and it's over for the Assad family after 50 years. What did you think when that was happening before our eyes?
I like to say I see things coming around the corner, but I think I and virtually everybody thought Assad had essentially won. He couldn't get control of the northern area, but it was contained, and then it just collapsed. And the only thing that I saw, and I remember actually texting some people about saying Israel's about to do something weird. And even though publicly there's no information indicating that Israel facilitated that. So I want to be clear that this is speculation on my part. But Israel had been, kind of regularly bombing targets in Syria. It wasn't even news anymore. They've been going on for years. And then it escalated after October 7th. It wasn't. And then all of a sudden, Netanyahu started saying in some interviews, he did, I think 2 or 3 times in a week. And if you follow him a lot like I do, sometimes you can tell something's up. And he was making the point, he goes, if Assad is going to allow weapons to go to terrorists, he's going to pay a price. But that had been going on for like, what triggered that comment? Because that's been going on. You've been bombing it. You've been intercepting it. So what? And he said it was something like, "Oh, his time's going to come soon." And I thought, like, it sounds like he's going to do something, but even Israeli analysts were saying that would be counterproductive. They, because it's too unpredictable. And then all this happened. So I think that there is probably with Turkey. I mean, definitely with Turkey. There's probably a really big story out there, kind of like the beeper bombs that went off.
Sure.
There was a covert operation, I'm pretty sure, similar to like the U.S. had with Saddam's military in Iraq, where they had sources that told people to withdraw, spread disinformation, so they weren't in the areas that were being taken over. Yeah. Because there was a certain confident tone in Netanyahu's voice. I was like, I feel like something's about to happen. And then
he knew something was coming. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no public information about what that was.
Yeah.
But I think something was up. As for what happened on college campuses, really there was a lot of people that have been talking about this kind of alliance between what's called the far left, even though I don't like that term, just like I don't like far right. But like the communist, anarchist elements, not your typical Democrats or liberals or progressives, like, the real anti-American ones, not ones that are like advocating on tax policy and healthcare. Like, they want to, they see the U.S. as evil, that these type of people. They have been increasingly teaming up with Islamists, and we saw that increasingly happening over 9/11. But now, instead of it being alliances, they have become one thing, to where you had hit a button, and they were so synchronized that they all acted as one entity. And I remember before the October 7th attacks were even over, like, they were literally, Hamas still killing people. And some of these groups that I monitor were declaring protests and rallies, some openly supporting the attacks, and others already saying we need to protest Israel's genocide. The attacks weren't over. Israel hadn't retaliated yet, really.
Yeah, they hadn't done it.
I mean, they had done some airstrikes, but like, and what I saw was there was an the messaging was already there. That's not new. So there was a perception among the American public, especially the youth, that like this talk about, Israel's engaging in genocide is a reaction to Israel overreacting to the attack. Like, no, they're spitting that out before the attacks even happened, and then they escalated it once they did. And these groups started putting together the protests immediately. They are pro-Hamas protests, because you look at all these groups. I actually did a big study where I tried to review every group I could find involved in the protest. I saw that.
It was phenomenal. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it was massive. And I found over 150 groups that are explicitly pro-terrorism, pro-Hamas, many of them supporting terrorism on U.S. soil, like killing police officers, burning down college campuses. Like, I mean, domestic terrorist groups. Of those that I found, like a couple small ones that support a two-state solution, even those supported violence as a way to get there. And I think I found one that was like, hey, we oppose violence. We want a two-state solution, but we disagree with what Israel's doing. And I don't even remember their name because they're so small. So this really was a pro-terrorist operation connected to communist China, Russia, Iran, all of them. I drew the links. I saw the financing. And so it was an attack. What you saw was an ideological and an incitement to violence type attack. It wasn't spontaneous protest. They had all that ready to go for whenever the moment would arise. The moment arose, and then they unleashed, and it looked like this spontaneous awakening of people to the immorality of the Israelis. But that was all. I mean, that was all built and ready to go. And so that's really what you saw. And they were able to bring in a lot of people. And, the number one question I get is, well, why are so many college students drawn to this? And it's really because of two things, I think. Number one is just the David versus Goliath, oppressor versus the stronger versus the weaker narrative. Whoever is stronger is the bad guy.
Yep.
Israel's seen as stronger, the Palestinians are the weaker, so we support the Palestinian side. Very simplistic. Then the other part that is simultaneously disturbing, but also kind of actually made me hopeful once I understood it. Because what I did was I took a lot of time to study the protesters that were involved as people, not just look at their political posts. A lot of people were doing that. I want to see what they talked to their friends about, what was going on with their families, because most people are not like me and the people that write on this issue, where this, like, politics takes up 5% of their lives, even protesters. You're missing out on everything if you judge them based on that. And what I found is that there is, and from reading their content, I better understand this, there is a understandable, credible desperation and fear of the younger generation over not being able to own a home, family members who are going bankrupt, unable to get the healthcare that they need,
Yeah.
People's lives being destroyed when people should have stepped in, churches, synagogues, the government, charities, and no one did.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the key protesters, everyone has stories like that. If you look at what they're talking about when they're not talking about politics. And so what happens is they become obsessed with the idea that I need a safety net that does not exist. The American system may have worked before. It doesn't work right now. I'm in danger. My family's in danger. And I want to make a difference, but I can't make a difference because I have no money. I'm too busy going to school and having to work. And so these two things come together. Number one, they want to make a difference. And the bad guys come in and say, here's a way to make a little bit of difference in the world. Come to this protest. Very enticing. They're taking something that's really honorable with the younger generation, where by the time they're in high school, they're already trying to be activists. They want to change the world. That was not what it was like when I was their age. It's amazing. They're very in tune with the world, and like there's so much social credit that comes with being a part of charity and social work and things like that. My generation, it was like what band was on your T-shirt.
That's right.
Them, it's like what causes are you posting about? Like that's amazing. So then these groups show up and say, I know that you're not capable of doing much, even though you want to. Here's something you can do. So they bring them in with that. The other element that comes in is that they seize that fear, and what the youth want to hear, they are not receptive to any voice that says, hey, it's not as bad as you think. You're going to be okay. You're just listening to propaganda from, the right wing or left. No. Whichever group talks about revolution, not violent, just whichever one uses the language that is most sweeping for reform, that we need to change and build a safety net.
Change everything,
Change everything, but like not in an evil way. They're going to listen to. So if you have someone like Bernie Sanders, even Trump said it, you say revolution, people think, oh, these students just want to burn things down. At first, they don't want to. But they hear revolution, they say, that's someone who gets it. They get the pain that I'm talking about, that we need sweeping change. And then they get brought in. It's not like they're reading Karl Marx and anarchist publications saying, oh, I'm joining that group. They say, no, those are guys talking about revolution. They understand my pain. They understand this is unacceptable, and we need big, big change. And then they come in, and these are the groups that say, here's the change, and here's the way you can help make it happen. Come to these protests. And we've got to figure out a way to address that. I mean, we've got to get students, I think, in high school, middle school, involved in positive causes, change the school system. If they have to go to school half the time, a third, like that's what they want and need. They want life experience. They want to feel like they're helping people. Give it to them and show them a way that they can act on that and get ahead in life and help people, because otherwise you're going to have these guys come in.
Well, it's so true. And I think, boy, there's no substitute for a trip to Israel where young people can go and see how the reality on the ground. 20% of the Knesset is Arab. Muslims are in the Knesset. They have no idea about that. And I think in getting back, one thing I wanted to say about Syria, because we have national leaders there from Syria, 15 of them. One of them told us that they were so obsessed with Israel attacking Syria that they really didn't realize the enemy within was getting bigger and bigger and stronger, ready to make a move. But even if the word Israel was said on the street one time, like you and I are in a conversation, we say the word Israel, 7 years in jail. They take you away. They were so freaked out about pastors, they couldn't preach out of the Old Testament. Israel, you can't say it, because there were spies in every church and that. And so they were so with their eyes on Israel. And then internally, it was just falling apart. And the corruption and all the money that came in for the earthquake that the Assad family took. And we heard the stories. It was just horrible. $38 million from one country, and nobody saw anything from that. Just heartbreaking, really, with people. But so as we close here, what do you think are the things in America that we need to be praying about? What are some things we need to pray against? And you've already started touching on that, about some of these groups that don't really understand the politics, but they've found a cause. Well, what do you think we need to pray about during this administration? There's a lot of people that see things Trump's doing. They're excited about it. And they think, oh, man, America's back, all that. We have a lot of problems. We have a lot of groups within that are dangerous. What do you say about that?
I'll say all these groups, they're created by something. Mm-hmm. So we can pray for groups or organizations to have wisdom and do this and that. Like, yeah, absolutely do that. but I think we need to look at mistakes that we're making, including myself, and what's going on in society at large to see what produces those leaders, because they get voted into power. These groups, they get donations from some, like there's something underneath it. And I think I got closer to the answer to once I started seeing why these protesters get drawn into this beyond just like, oh, what anti-Israel propaganda are they adopting? Like, no, why are they even visiting the sites with that? Like, why are they even why are they even talking about this of all the issues? And once I saw that, I'm like, you know what it is? There's some key things happening in our society that I do think we need to pray about and be on guard against, all of us. Number one, humility. It's been called the death of expertise, meaning there's just a lack of regard for people who study things. And it's like you read one book and they would think they know Gaza as well as you, Tom. Like it's just, and I come across it everywhere. It's just like, I don't know what happened, but there's just like no regard for experience and studying anymore, where it's like, oh, you just did a little bit. Oh, therefore I'm on the level of my professor.
That's right.
So there has to be humility. Faith in our system has to be restored. And I think that's only going to happen if there has to be a rebirth of nuance. People have to look at these issues instead of being black and white and view it as a puzzle and kind of enjoy putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, oh, I'm going to listen to Fox or CNN because I most agree with them, or I think they're right. The other ones are liars. No, be data collectors, like a puzzle piece.
Yeah.
There's something can be 90% wrong. Find the 10% that's facts and data that you can contend with, and then put together pieces and try. And that's enjoyable if you can take the emotion and the ego out of it. So there has to be really just a rebirth of a healthy civil society, I think, in order for the West to survive. And then, of course, obviously, Christianity and spiritual values and stuff all play a role in that. But I'm trying to talk about the stuff that's less predictable, because whenever you say, well, should we pray against it? People say, of course you pray for that. But I'm trying to think of stuff that also intersects that aren't commonly mentioned. And I would say, the fragmentation, the balkanization of our civil society, the death of nuance, the arrogance, all of this, and also pray that the positive elements, like we're seeing in the very annoying younger generation that drives me crazy in multiple ways, but they're also better than my generation in some ways.
Yeah, for sure.
And we should recognize that. And I mean, the opportunity there is just incredible. So we have to love them, not just because we're supposed to and force ourselves to. Like, there's great reasons to respect them and admire them. And I would hope that more people would see that and put thought into, well, how do we address their grievances? Maybe they're not all just crazy. And how do we harness their talents and some of these really amazing features of the next generation?
Boy, that is so true. What a good place to end. And Ryan Mauro is the president of Doubting Thomas Research. And so one of the things I've really enjoyed is your Telegram channel. And so you got to get on Telegram.
Oh, I didn't know you were on it. Okay.
I'm on it. And cool. Also that report that you gave about the different groups to watch in America, that was so thorough. I haven't seen that anywhere. People should get on that. And we're going to have all the information on the screen, but just a pleasure to know you and to just hear your heart, and someone that really understands the situation in the Middle East and has heart for the people. You go there. You just got back from there. And so got to have you on again. Thank you for all that you're doing and how you're clarifying the Middle East. Like, whenever we talk about the Middle East, we always say, well, it's complicated. You know, people just want one answer. This is the answer. Never going to get there. And really, ultimately, we both agree as believers that heart changes are needed, and the UN can't pull off peace. Really, Jesus can, for sure. We've seen it. We've seen Palestinians and Jews that love each other now because they love Jesus as Savior. So we certainly agree on that. But thanks for being on our program, and God bless you in your ministry.
Thank you so much. And likewise, I love following your work, and you've been a big blessing in my life, and I love what your ministry is doing. So I know people are listening already follow you, but take it as an additional endorsement from me, as someone who studies these issues, that you're in good hands.
Oh, man, thank you so much. Well, let's go do something together. Saudi Arabia, Israel, something. Get two groups together, huh? We'd love it.
To.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.